Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Chris Nur, Chief Digital Officer of Synity, a world leader in enterprise data software, and we're partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT CDO IQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers to bring you this series of interviews with thought leaders in data and analytics. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking with Mark Marshalek, Head of Data Governance at Farmers Insurance. Welcome, Mark. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Chris.
Mark, if we jump right in, you were with Nationwide Insurance for a number of years in a variety of leadership roles. And one of the things that's always interesting to me is you started on the business side and over time moved into the data space. You recently joined Farmers as head of data governance. Congratulations. Can you share a bit about the Farmers Insurance organization and your brief in the organization? As chief of data governance, are you driving growth, efficiency, risk, regulatory management? Are you internally focused, market focused? Kind of give us a sense of your vision for the organization.
Absolutely. And I've obviously joined Farmers Insurance. I've only been here about 7 months. Once again, my experience and my background, I'm from the financial services industry, as you've seen with my Nationwide experience. Farmers is another one of those world-class financial services providers that's primarily focused on P&C insurance across the United States. Wonderful company, great culture, really looking to expand their data and analytic capabilities. And as they are looking to build that out, that's when they look to bring in a head of data governance. And I know you called out a lot. You called out growth. You called out efficiency, risk, regulatory, internal market focus. The short answer is yes. As we look forward and we're trying to move our program and advance our cause within the Farmers organization, we're trying to hit on all of those areas. And I know as we go through our conversation, I'll get into a little more detail as to why, but where I usually start is I've got to start bringing business value to the organization. And that's where the growth comes into play. That comes the market focus. As I can get more and more value added to the organization through the governance practices that we're looking to implement, that's where I'll start to get the traction and interest for moving the program forward and really create that enterprise scale that they're looking for. So yeah, covering them all, and it's exciting, exciting and challenging.
I love that answer, and I realize there are a lot of dimensions to that, but it's sort of in talking to chief data officers in general, what I find is that is the answer. You're sort of mixing all of these things together, and I like your perspective that how you get energy behind these programs and kind of build a data culture is by showing real business value. That it's about financial results and it's about improving differentiation and improving your end customer's experience.
I couldn't agree with you more. And where I'm coming from, that's the way you get that traction. You're going to be in a lot of instances asking work of individuals, both in the business and the IT organization, that's over and above existing tasks. If I can link that back to some sort of value proposition, then I know I've got the hook. I can take my mission forward with them as a partner because they see that end value state that we're looking to enable going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the business IT thing. Let's talk about that. Are you reporting up into the business, into IT? One of the things that I found fascinating about data is it's kind of a hybrid discipline. So it neither works without business sponsorship, nor does it work without information technology sponsorship. So how does that work in Farmers?
So right now I do report up through the IT organization and our chief data officer. What I will say, while I report up into the IT organization, my accountabilities and my responsibilities cover both business and IT. Like you hit the nail right on the head, Chris, earlier. I can't do the work I need to do without having business on board, as well as IT contributing their resources. So it truly is a balancing act to make sure I got the partnership, I'm clear on what I need from both areas, and I got to keep the relationships fresh and alive for both of those areas so that I can achieve my overall my overall target going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've found is that that's another one where the answer is yes. So, some report into the business, some report into IT, some have, different reporting arrangement, but I think universally everyone's very focused on this, kind of hybrid, and that data governance and chief data officers are in an orchestration role, kind of bringing different stakeholders together to drive the business and really take advantage of that idea of data as an asset.
Well, and that's what makes these types of roles exciting, because you're not really focused in one specific area. There's one day I could be talking to executive sponsors, I could be talking to data stewards. There's a next day I could be talking to IT executives. To be able to stay on top of all of those elements and stay current and relevant with all that content and all that detail that's needed in order to translate that into the work that we're doing, in my case for data governance, it's fun. It keeps it exciting. It's fresh. And it's something that I know I will not be successful if I focus on one area over another. And I love the part we get to play in both spaces, because it shows the value we can bring to the table for all those areas.
I've done some amount of work in the insurance industry, and one of my observations is that data has a special role in what we would normally think of as product development, right? So when you're developing an insurance product, in a sense, a lot of the product is actually made out of data. That's sort of one observation. The other observation is that regulatory, lots of different kinds of data, generally fairly siloed. For example, you mentioned property and casualty. Lines of business are generally fairly segregated. There's a lot of state and federal kind of overlapping regulatory framework. So in working with the business, how much of what you do is on what I would call, probably a bit simplistically, the product development side versus enabling all of that from kind of all that back end complexity that I just described?
And I would say that for the most part, and I'll even take a step back, within the insurance industry, you hit the nail right on the head. Data has been our fundamental. It has been fundamentally a part of insurance since the time insurance began within the world. We cannot do anything. If you think about the risks that we try to assess, the products we tried to build, all of that is based on the data that we've aggregated. So data in the insurance industry is nothing new. It's been around. We use it. So when we hear all these concepts, big data, data and analytics, the insurance industry, although not exciting, not flashy, has really been doing these types of things for years. And it's somewhat refreshing to see people now starting to see, gosh, maybe the insurance industry had it right. Maybe data is an asset. Maybe it is something that we can use in a much broader level. And my focus, while the product areas are important to an insurance company, a lot of and they rely on the data that my team is accountable for providing oversight of. I would say most of our work is really branching out even beyond the product area and the product spaces and working with some of those silos and trying to get an understanding of what data is out there in those silos. How do we have control over that data? And then how do we bring it all back together so that if the product team does want to use some of that information, they have the access, the knowledge, and the awareness of what's out there so that they can take it to their analytic models and look to improve the products. But for me, product is not where I spend a ton of time per se. I'm more focused on, let me get my arms around all of this data, let me catalog, let me assess, let me evaluate, let me define, how can I create this global asset that can then be used by anybody across the enterprise to perform whatever data or an analytic scenario they want to walk through.
Well, I think that's really insightful, Mark. Thank you for that. And I think so. If I sort of replay that, it's almost like what I call the world of data operations, right? So it sounds like a lot of your work is sort of focused on creating that high availability, well curated with proper controls, regulatory framework, that set of assets that then the product teams, since the products are basically largely made out of data anyway, they can kind of go and in a more orderly and a more innovative fashion kind of figure out how you can price risk, which essentially is what insurance boils down to.
Correct. I think that's a great synopsis.
And interestingly, you made another point that I just can't resist amplifying for any math geeks in the audience. If you're my age and at one point you took linear algebra, right? Actuarial science is essentially applied linear algebra. Big data and tensor analysis, the way that it's deployed in Google and Facebook and all these technology companies, is distributed processing on large sets of data, primarily using linear algebra or tensor-based applications. So it's like the technology caught up with actuarial science the way that it's been done for the last 100 years. So just a historical footnote for anyone who doesn't, it's a fascinating area of technology.
And I think once again, we could, this would take us down another path, maybe for another conversation, but data, people oftentimes have looked at data. Oh, I'm not a data person. In today's environment, I don't think that's an acceptable answer anymore. And I think data, understanding data, being able to use data, that's a discipline that we need to instill across the board, across an enterprise, across our education system, because it is becoming more and more prominent. It is becoming more important. And being able to understand how to use data in order to make decisions is going to be a foundational skill. In my opinion, it already is a foundational skill for anybody coming into the business world. And that's what's exciting is a lot of folks have oftentimes said, oh, I'm not a data person, and they kind of wipe their hands. That's, in my opinion, that's not going to fly anymore. And it goes against where the world is taking us with the volume of data that's being created, the amount of data that can be used for improved decision making. It's really exciting from my perspective to finally see data getting the attention as a discipline across the business spectrum, as opposed to kind of that hands off. Oh, you're an expert in that data space.
Yeah, that data stuff. Yeah, I completely agree. I think you raise a good point too, which is that data literacy, both for folks coming out of university and out of grad school, but business people and technology people. There's so many things available now, and it's so ubiquitous. Actually, knowing what they mean and kind of being able to break down the signal to noise ratio and not just throw a bunch of data, throw a bunch of analytics, to actually, back to where you started the conversation, like if it's not producing any business value, actually the folks who are paying for it don't care. So we've really got to do a good job of kind of connecting the dots on that.
And once again, I think that's what's the most exciting thing about the data roles that we play today is, we're not just here taking orders, kicking out information. We're truly challenging the envelope on, well, you asked for this, but are you sure you want this? Because here are the implications, and kind of walking folks through what they're asking versus what they would be receiving. And I think that's what's exciting. And you take the knowledge that you have of data, work with somebody that's trying to solve or answer some sort of question. It's rewarding and refreshing to work in that type of capacity and deliver that type of value and help somebody understand a little bit more about the importance of data, how this process can work in a successful way. For me, it's an exciting time. And it's a great opportunity for all of us.
Absolutely. Well, so maybe building on a couple of these points, I've observed, I think over certainly the last 10 years, people love to talk about data governance. Sometimes they love to talk about it more than they love to do it. I'm impressed that you're in this data governance role. So, and from what you've said, obviously you're doing it. Talk to me a little bit about how you design a successful set of programs that builds a data culture and demonstrates those business results. So I'm sure you're familiar with this idea in core IT, there's been this sort of bimodal or multimodal concept, which is you have sort of, big aircraft carrier style programs, and then you have these little speedboats. So what's kind of the mix of how you're approaching this coming into a marquee role in a big, complicated, world-class organization in terms of that sort of multimodal approach?
Well, and I will say, for me to be successful in what I've been focused on thus far, both at Farmers as well as nationwide, it's the speedboats.
Okay.
How can I keep these segments and these programs and these efforts like data cataloging, business glossaries, data quality? How can I keep them siloed enough and small enough that both business and IT can digest it and will be willing to give it a chance as far as implementing some of the practices we recommend, but then also keeping that aircraft carrier mindset that all of these little pieces have to come together at some point to create this uniform program that is much larger than the individual pieces as a whole. I'll probably date myself. For anybody who has seen the Power Rangers, I think they are a perfect example of what we're talking about here, where you have the individuals that have their unique set of skills and capabilities, but when they come together, they create that much larger, more powerful entity that's out there. That's the process that I'm trying to use. And what I find when I focus on the smaller pieces initially, it allows me to get those traction elements going. It allows me to get some quick wins.
Yeah.
It allows me to celebrate. And then now all of a sudden I can start to bring people together to say, okay, let me try another piece. Okay, let me try another piece. You've kind of taken me on this journey. You're showing me some value. I'm willing to give you another opportunity to show more value. And that's once I get that traction and once I get all of those elements moving together, and I think that's where we're going to come to that more larger program that's going to be much more successful to our organization going forward.
Well, I'm wondering, and it makes a lot of sense. One observation I've had is that there's kind of a risk in the data and analytics space, as you're describing, of getting into sort of like science lab shiny object syndrome, and you do 100 things that have sort of a localized impact, but many companies have experienced challenges industrializing them and kind of bringing them up to scale. Now, I think they're actually, to our earlier conversation, there's some characteristics of the insurance industry which maybe make that a little easier. Like you're not going to do something that's a throwaway because of the regulatory rigor
Correct.
that's involved.
Yep.
So, I may actually have answered my own question. I'm speculating a bit, but in terms of your tenure at Farmers so far, you can see a path towards sort of cherry picking out the successful speedboats and then scaling them up without necessarily making a production of it in terms of stakeholder management. Is that a fair summary?
I think that's very, very fair. And I one of the things, and I've seen it at both companies that I work with, there are a lot of silos that are executing those speedboat type activities within their areas. That what I typically find is once I find those silos, by conducting an evaluation assessment as we're going in to figure out, what does this roadmap and implementation plan look like? But when I find those silos, now my mindset is changing from, I got to start from ground zero. Really, if I've got enough of these silos doing a data catalog or data quality, the effort it takes for me to jumpstart those efforts because it's already in flight and I've already got stakeholders on board with how we want to move forward is much, much easier, much more manageable, and shows that value much quicker to get others built in and bought off on the program and how we want to move forward. So I absolutely think that find those things you're doing today that you can build upon.
Yeah.
Even if they're not necessarily where you want to be from a technical standpoint, even if it is Excel and they're doing some sort of catalog, what's the process they use and how can I replicate it? Now, not only am I taking something already in there, I've got another salesman with me to help convince folks of the value because they're doing it. And it allows me to then kind of bring people along on the journey without me being the sole driver and an explainer of what value comes to the organization.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, and I've found that as well. And doing all kinds of change programs, if you get some pull from the business, it's a lot easier than if you're like, hey, this is sort of famous, right? Like I'm from corporate and I'm here to help, and people are like, yeah, right.
No, nobody cares. No, yeah, that I'm from corporate, and they know that you can't. But when you show that value, man alive, seeing their eyes light up and then seeing, okay, show me what I have to do. Now I've got that door's open and I can build that partnership. And that's really what I enjoy. Once that door's open, you're going to have the best partner to help you along on this journey myself, my team, and the expectations I put on my team for helping resolve and helping bring people along, that, in my opinion, is the key to change. I showed you the way. Now I'm going to be there with you as you're going through it. I'm going to show you how to fish. And now once you're ready, I'm going to cut the ties and you're going to be on your own. But realize I'm still that backstop for you. So you always got an out in case you do have questions or problems. And I love that aspect of the work we do going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, super. No, that I very much agree, and I think that's great advice. Maybe if I could quickly put you on the spot, any final thoughts or kind of major predictions on anything, data wise, insurance industry wise, over a 3 to 5 year horizon?
Oh my gosh, I will say that the insurance industry, once again, I've been in insurance my entire life. And this is shocking to a lot of people. Insurance truly is going through a technological evolution, and it is so fun to see some of these new methods and approaches that companies are coming up with for pricing data. We talked a little bit about that product aspect earlier. It's so interesting to see all of the technological innovations that are being thrown out there that are really changing how people look at insurance, how people buy insurance. In my opinion, the agent, people are becoming more comfortable with purchasing insurance through a website, through a phone or a mobile app. So I think it presents some very interesting opportunities for our agents, and how do they differentiate themselves and show the value that they bring, because they do bring a significant amount of value to the value chain. But how do they do it a little bit different, given that many people are going through some of the technological components and aspects of the insurance buying process? I think it's one of the most exciting industries. Many may, it doesn't have all the fun, the bells, the whistles of a Google, of a Facebook, but the direction that insurance is heading is just so exciting. And I'm happy to be a part of it with the organization that I'm with.
Awesome. Well, I agree. Actually, as I said, I've done some amount of work in the insurance industry. It's a fascinating industry, and I would encourage anyone who has not spent time. If you have the idea that it's like boring and stodgy, it's a lot more interesting than you think. That's from client work that I've done. I think it's actually quite an interesting. And I think to your point, it's been relatively insulated from technological change compared to other industries because of the regulatory firewall complexity, but that's evolving over time. So if anyone's looking for a career change into insurance, this is a good moment, and we have it from Mark. So I definitely I think that's worth a lot.
Well, and any opportunity I get to promote the industry, especially to the younger folks that are out, I'm going to take full advantage, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's exciting to be in insurance right now, and I think the data capabilities that are out there highlight just how exciting of an industry this can be going forward.
Absolutely. Good. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I very much enjoyed our conversation. Again, my guest has been Mark Marshalek, Head of Data Governance at Farmers Insurance. And thanks so much for joining me today, Mark.
Chris, I appreciate the invite, and have a good day. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.